I've always loved being in places that are secluded, away from the city. There's nothing better than having a beautiful view with hot tea and a good book. So when my friend asked me to house sit for her over the weekend, I couldn't resist. Her house is surrounded by trees and nature. I love any opportunity to go there. As I arrived at the house, I could smell the crisp air and the pine from the trees. The house was huge, at least double the size of mine, but it was very cozy inside. My friend had left detailed instructions for taking care of the plants around the house and her sweet German Shepherd dog named Ripley. After settling into the house and following some of the directions, I decided to take Ripley on a walk. We began strolling around the forestry path, and Ripley barked at every little thing, barking at birds, bugs, and even leaves. I usually have to tug at the leash to keep her walking because she gets distracted, but this time I kept tugging at her leash and noticed she didn't move. I looked back to see Ripley staring to the left of the forest, whining. "Ripley, come on, let's go," I said to her. Ripley just kept on whining and looking into the forest. I followed her gaze and was immediately confused. There was a large patch of trees that had its leaves pointed downwards, almost like it was glued to the sides of the branches. I've never seen anything like it. I pulled on the leash to lead Ripley home because she was getting a little scared herself. A few hours passed by and I sat by the crackling fire in the living room, reading my book. Ripley was curled up at my feet, finished with her dinner and content. I put my book down to close my eyes and drifted off to sleep. I abruptly woke up after a strange sensation washed over me. It felt like my skin was vibrating and the air was thick, making it hard to breathe. I looked over at my phone to see what time it was, but it was acting strange. The screen was glitching out. I tried turning the power on and off, but it didn't work. I saw that the fire had gone out, so I knew I was asleep for a couple of hours. I got up to look at the clock in the kitchen, but the numbers on it were glitching out too. The TV was also affected, displaying a garbled mess of static. What was going on? Then, I heard a low humming sound coming from outside. Peering out the window, I became startled. A huge flash of light passed over the house. It was moving slowly, but I couldn't see what it was exactly. It was just a giant ball of light, illuminating the whole house, nearly blinding me. It passed through the trees and the humming faded with it. I didn't take my eyes off the forest, but I couldn't tell if I was scared or fascinated by it. As soon as it was out of view, the TV turned back on and my phone lit up. I don't know what it was, but it interfered with electronics. It must have been a military plane. It's the only explanation. The next morning, I brushed off the incident, continuing on with my day and taking care of Ripley. Night was approaching, and I started to feel a sense of dread settle over me. I was on the couch watching a TV show while Ripley had her head on my lap sleeping. Then, the TV show cut out. It was replaced with static. The lights flickered in the house and the air became heavy. It was happening again. I stood up, frantically looking around, terrified. The giant light came back, but this time it was hovering over the house. I scrambled to get my phone off the couch, but it wasn't working. I couldn't call for help or even take a video of this moment. I was utterly helpless and alone. Ripley began barking, and the light intensified. Her barks turned to whimpers, and she ran to hide under the dining room table. The light shined brighter and emitted a low-pitched sound that sent shivers down my spine. I covered my ears. The buzzing sound was all I could hear. I curled up on the ground with streams of tears running down my face. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, the light vanished, leaving me alone, stuck to the floor. Ripley came over to comfort me. I spent the rest of the night huddled with her, too terrified to close my eyes. Dawn finally came and my fear slowly subsided. My friend returned home not long after. I tried to tell her what had happened, but she didn't believe me. She said she never experienced something like that, and just laughed it off. I didn't say anything more about it, so I said goodbye to Ripley and left. I knew the truth and witnessed something unexplainable. I drove away from the forest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had visited us last night was still out there. Every year on the 4th of July, My family and all my neighbors would go to the nearby park to grill hot dogs and watch the fireworks. But I remember one year when I chose to stay home and play video games. I was 13 at the time and was old enough to stay home by myself. I waved at my parents as they were leaving and sat back on the couch to enjoy the new game I got. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I could hear the distant pops and crackles of the fireworks. I was having a good time playing my game, but I saw that the batteries in my controller died, so I went to the drawer to get some more. When I walked back to the couch, I heard the unmistakable sound of glass shattering outside. I cautiously approached the window and looked through the curtains. A figure dressed in black was at my neighbor's porch. I watched in horror as the intruder reached inside the neighbor's window and unlocked the door. He grabbed a black duffel bag off the ground next to him and slung it over his shoulder. My heart was racing so fast, and I quickly grabbed my cell phone to dial 911. Luckily, someone answered a second later. "Hello? There's someone breaking into my neighbor's house right now," I said. The operator replied, "Okay, what is your name and address?" I told the operator everything I saw and told them where I lived. I tried to describe the intruder's movements as best as I could. I intently watched as he ransacked the house through the neighbor's windows. He was rummaging around in drawers and putting things in his duffel bag. The thief went back to the front of the house, but I lost sight of him. He must have gone upstairs. I raced upstairs to my own bedroom because it was on the same side as that house. I pushed my curtains aside and scanned the room across from me. I finally caught a glimpse of the thief again. "Hello? Max, are you still there?" I quietly whispered. "Yes, I am." The thief is on the second floor now. I see him putting necklaces and rings in his bag. I suddenly froze and held my breath. The intruder looked up, locking his gaze onto mine in the darkness. Blood was draining from my face while we looked at each other. Then the man bolted out of the room. Oh no, he saw me. I was looking around from window to window to see where he was at, but I lost him. I heard the crunching of glass and looked down toward the neighbor's porch. The man sprinted off the neighbor's property and ran to my house. "He's at my door!" I shouted at my phone. I couldn't hear a word the operator was saying because there was loud banging coming from the door. I sprinted down the stairs and saw his shadowy figure outside the front door. He was shaking the door handle and slamming his body against it. I was so scared and couldn't move, but the banging got louder, along with the sound of wood bending. He's breaking the door down. I knew I had to leave because he was going to break in at any moment. I turned around and ran out the back door, not looking back. There was a small hole in my neighbor's fence, but it was big enough for me to squeeze through. I heard a giant thud coming from inside my house. He was definitely in there now. I ran through the backyard and out the side gate. I kept running until I made it to the park where my parents were. Thankfully, I saw them in sight and called out to them. All the neighbors looked my way as I was screaming that a thief was at the house. Some of the neighbors then ran back the way I came, hoping to catch the thief. My parents walked me back to the house and the police had already arrived. Our front door was completely busted in and the wooden frame smashed into pieces. I made the right decision by leaving. Who knows what would have happened if I stayed. The thief was long gone, but he forgot to take the black duffel bag with him. The police found it upstairs in the neighbor's bedroom, with everything still inside. Even though nothing was stolen and I got out just fine, I will always remember the sound of glass breaking on my neighbor's porch and the bending of the wood on my front door. No amount of fireworks would ever drown that sound out for me again. All of my life, I have never lived alone. I lived with my parents until I was 23, and when I moved out, I always had a roommate wherever I went. For the last 2 years, my best friend Alex lived with me in an apartment just outside of the city we grew up in. But she moved out today, so this is the first time I'll be living alone. The apartment felt lonely without my friend, and I was starting to miss having her company. So in order to fill the silence, I turned on a movie while I made dinner. As I was preparing all of my ingredients, I heard a faint knock at the door. I made my way to the front door, opened it, and saw no one. I peered into the darkness, but I didn't see anyone. I probably just heard a noise from the movie I put on. I closed the door and went back to cooking my dinner. 2 hours passed by and I was getting ready for sleep. I jumped under the covers and was drifting off, when all of a sudden I heard a knocking at the door again. That was definitely not from the TV. I looked at my clock and thought, who would be knocking at 11 p.m. at night? I made my way to the front door and turned on the light outside. I looked through the window and saw no one. Maybe I had some packages delivered that I didn't remember. I opened the door, but didn't see anyone or any packages. Before I closed the door, I saw a yellow sticky note attached to it. I peeled off the note and it read, "I see you." My heart skipped a beat, and I looked around again, but there was no sign of anyone. With a nervous laugh, I chalked it up to thinking it was a neighbor kid just playing a prank. I crumpled up the note and headed for my bed. The next day, I came home from work exhausted. I was too tired to cook, so I decided to order takeout. 30 minutes passed by, and I got a message on my phone that said my food was delivered outside. I picked it up and was excited to devour it. But as I was opening the bag, I heard a knock at the door. Did the delivery guy forget to drop something off? I opened my door to see another sticky note attached to the frame. No one was at the door as usual. I pulled the sticky note off and went absolutely still. It said, "Alone, at last." Who would write this? It seemed too creepy to be a prank from a kid. Alone at last? It must have been Alex. She left and is now just poking fun at me. I smiled and went back to the couch. I pulled out my phone and texted her, "Good one. If you're feeling lonely, just say so." A minute later, she replied, "What are you talking about?" I texted her the picture of the sticky note and wrote, "You have to try harder to scare me next time. It was so obvious that it was you." Another minute went by and she replied, "That's not me. I didn't put a note on your door. I've been visiting my parents the last 2 days. Are you okay?" I sat on the couch stunned. I read her message over and over again. If it's not her, who was it? Then I heard a dreadful knock at the door. My eyes turned to the left of me, and I could see a figure standing by the window. Fear shot through my body. The figure darted away from the door. Even with my fear, I wanted to know who was leaving me notes. I sprinted towards the door, quickly opened it, but the person was gone. My eyes widened as I saw several notes on my door and window. They said, "I'm watching you. I like seeing you scared. I'll find a way in." I was numb reading these notes. My only thought at that moment was to shout into the darkness, "Stop leaving me notes. I'm calling the cops." I stayed out there for a few more seconds, scanning the street, hoping I'd see the creep. But all I saw were flickering street lamps. I shut the door loudly and made sure to double-check the locks. I called my friend Alex and told her everything that happened. She agreed to come pick me up because I didn't want to stay here alone anymore. I didn't feel safe. As I was packing some clothes in a suitcase in my room, I heard a noise that will forever haunt me to this day. Pounding sounds were coming from my bedroom window. I screamed at the top of my lungs and twirled to see a hand pounding onto my window. These weren't the light knocks from before. These knocks were loud and it shook the window. The knocks didn't stop. It was constant. I thought the window was going to break. I shut the bedroom door and called 911. The knock stopped as soon as dialed the number. Nowhere was safe. The police showed up 3 minutes later, reassuring me that no one was at the bedroom window. They took my statement, but there was no footage or suspect. There was nothing they could do. Alex finally showed up minutes later and took me back to her parents' place. I never felt safe going back there, so I stayed with Alex until I could find some roommates to live with me. That experience made me never want to live alone again. And now every time I see yellow sticky notes, I'm afraid it came from the person who knocked on my door. I live a pretty normal, boring life. I work, eat dinner, watch TV, and sleep. I don't bother anyone and I enjoy my solitary lifestyle. But the last couple weeks have been anything but normal. I was sitting in my living room on a Saturday evening watching one of my sitcoms. Then I heard a chime from my phone and saw that it was my security system for my house. It said that one of the kitchen windows had been opened. My eyes immediately looked over to the kitchen in the next room. I didn't see anything, nor did I even hear the window open. I looked around to see if there were any objects I could use to defend myself if there was an intruder. The closest thing I had was a metal fork that I used to eat my TV dinner. I grabbed it and walked slowly to the kitchen. My hand was shaking as I stuck the fork out and peered my head inside the dark kitchen. The window was slightly open, maybe not more than 1 inch open. It definitely was not enough for a person to get inside. Now I seemed silly holding a fork as a weapon. I turned on the lights and shut the window. I looked outside and checked the back door just in case. Everything seemed the same. Nothing was disturbed. I put the fork in the sink and walked back to the TV. The weird thing is that this happened 3 other nights that week. The same kitchen window kept getting open, and it was only open the same amount, just like the last time. There must have been something wrong with its mechanics. I decided to super glue it shut, and that took care of the problem. A week went by, and I went back to my usual routines. I was back on my couch the next Saturday, watching my weekly sitcom episode. I was starting to get hungry, so I went to the kitchen to make some popcorn. I grabbed a bowl from the cupboard and froze. There was a loud noise coming from the bushes in front of the kitchen window, but I couldn't see much since it was so dark. I remembered I had a portable flashlight in the drawer next to me, so I grabbed it and turned it on. I pointed it through the window and toward the bush. For a split second, I saw something dark gray vanish into the garden. My heart started pounding, and I stared outside for what seemed like 5 minutes. I must be going crazy. It was probably a raccoon or possum out there. I calmed myself down and microwaved a bowl of popcorn. I went back to my TV show, and after an hour, I fell asleep on the couch. I was abruptly woken up to chiming sounds. I looked at my phone to see 3 notifications from my security system. It said that 3 windows on the first and second floor had been opened. I jolted up from the couch in a panic. The window in the living room had been opened slightly, but it wasn't all the way up since this one had a lock on it. How did I not notice that? Someone is actually opening windows in my house. I immediately shut it and ran to the kitchen and saw that window was open too. I pulled out my phone to call the police. A lady answered, "911 operator, what is your emergency?" "Hi, I think someone is in my house. All my windows are open and I'm getting notifications on my phone about it." As I was giving her more details, I heard a thumping noise upstairs. I felt sheer terror at that moment. "I think they're upstairs," I told the operator. She replied, "The police are on their way. Can you get somewhere safe?" Before I could say anything, I could hear noticeable footsteps walking around from room to room. He was getting closer to the stairs. I frantically looked around and darted to the pantry. I was able to squeeze myself inside. It didn't have any locks, so if he opened it, that would be it for me. I put my phone in my pocket so there wouldn't be any glow from the light. I was breathing heavily, but I couldn't help it. I was terrified, so I put my hands over my mouth to muffle the noise. I heard him walking down the steps and into the living room. He spent a long time in there. I don't know if he was stealing stuff or looking for me. My heart was racing so fast and I began shaking. I was begging in my head, "Please, please don't open the pantry." The footsteps were in the kitchen now. He was right next to the pantry. I didn't hear him rustling around, only the sound of footsteps. My hands gripped tighter over my mouth. I thought this was it, that he was going to get me. Then I heard a shout from the front door. "Police!" The footsteps in the kitchen quickened, and I heard the back door open. He left. I burst through my pantry door and let the police in. I was so relieved. They did a search inside the house and around my property, but they didn't find anyone. Nothing was even stolen from my house. But they said my kitchen window was destroyed and that they also found some rope lying outside in the garden. I was so scared thinking about that. He wanted to harm me, but I was motivated to keep myself safe. I bought cameras for every window and door outside my house. I put automatic sensory lights all around the perimeter. I even bought a handgun and adopted a large dog. So if he decides to come back next time, I'll be ready.